So J.D. Vance, the vice president, was just in Israel, and he made a few statements that, frankly, raise more than an eyebrow or two from my end. I don't know about you, and I'll show you what I'm referring to in a moment. But just for a little bit of context, to be honest, I've been looking at J.D. Vance for a while, and I've always felt with him that his support of Israel is lukewarm. It's there. He defends Israel and says it's not a genocide. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. But he definitely is a supporter. At the same time, there's I always sensed with him that this is a kind of a different category, certainly to Trump, certainly to the evangelical Christian community in America. And given that there's this context of a raging battle going on in the Republican Party, or rather in the MAGA base about Israel, I'm sure that, majority is still supportive of Israel, but we are seeing figures like Tucker Carlson and others injecting an anti-Israel rhetoric in there. Who knows whether Vance feels he needs to kind of play this game a little bit more of appeasing both sides. Maybe he's just a bit ignorant of the conflict and the deeper truths about it. But either way, I just wanted to share this with you to flag that I certainly do not think that Vance is necessarily like firmly in the pro-Israel camp. And I say this, by the way, not to be like, I demand your full unequivocal support of Israel or anything like that, even though I think one should for America's interests and for basic morality. It's just simply for you, the viewer, to understand that I think there's some moral confusion among some American leaders and potential future presidential candidates. So let's have a watch of this first clip when he was in Israel. I think this was just after he arrived.
We're not going to force anything on our Israeli friends when it comes to foreign troops on their soil, but we do think that there's a constructive role for the Turks to play, and frankly, they've already played a very constructive role. We're very grateful for that. And you asked, they've supported Hamas in the past. No one who is a party to this conflict can look in the past and not point at something that they don't like or that they disagree with. Everybody who's been involved in this conflict can point at one other person. One of these flags can point at another flag and say, we hate that person for various reasons. The way that we're going to get to peace is to focus on the future, which is what the President of the United States has asked us to do. And we think everybody here is very willing to do that and is very eager to engage in that effort.
So that for me shows I think is the words of someone that doesn't have a deep understanding of this conflict or a sane understanding of this conflict. I'm not saying Israel's perfect. No human being is perfect. I'm not saying that. But if you don't understand fundamentally that there's no moral equivalence, and if you don't make clear moral difference between the Israel side and Palestinianism, which has solely throughout its history been about trying to destroy Israel and the Jewish state, if you can't see a distinction there, if you can't see a clear cause and effect that there's ideological hatred towards the Jews and then Israel responds, as opposed to, Israel doing something bad and then the Arabs just resisting. If you can't see that it's the former and not the latter and clearly spell that out, and you just say, well, both sides have really upset each other here, and, that is the language of moral equivalence. And I think that if you go down that path, very, very dangerous. You can actually divide, I would say, people's views of Israel, even some who may seem to be pro-Israel. You can divide the world into two camps. Those that see the Palestinian cause and Palestinianism as based on a legitimate grievance that maybe they haven't handled well, but it's ultimately a legitimate grievance. Or those who say this is clearly based on ideological hatred. Why were there Arab Islamic riots, pogroms in the land, in the territory in the 1920s, in the 1830s? Well, before you have a Zionist Israel state like that. So this is fundamental. And this, by the way, is why, if you haven't already, you need to watch the documentary on what really happened in 1948 on JTV Plus. It's a documentary we created. There's a link to that below in the video description, and I'll play the trailer for you. You'll see it in a lot of videos. But I think that this is fundamental to understand. He also spoke about Turkey as our partner being involved. I don't know if you're aware of this, but earlier this year, the president of Turkey, Erdogan, said, quote, "May Allah, for the sake of his name, destroy and devastate Zionist Israel." This sentence was not uttered by a Hamas or Hezbollah leader, as Amichai Chikli wrote. It was said in a public prayer by the president of Turkey, Erdogan, a sworn enemy of Israel and the West, a jihadist in a suit. He's likely never opened the Quran nor heard of King David and Solomon, both praised in Surah and other chapters, consistently trying to undermine the Jewish people's eternal bond with their capital. And he says Jerusalem is our city. And by the way, you should know this is really fascinating because the war of Gog and Magog, which is spoken of in Ezekiel, in the Tanakh, in the prophets, speak of some kind of forces from the north, which some commentaries think could refer to Turkey, actually. So the fact that this is Turkey suddenly coming onto the scene now, as well as Persia and other forces as well, mentioned there. But it's just worth noting, right? But I think it's, ridiculous to think that, the process is now going to have other Arab countries, Egypt, controlling Gaza. In some ways, this could potentially be even more risky, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a foreign policy expert, so maybe you can enlighten me if you know more about this than I do. But let's just think it through. We're going to have other Arab countries now being involved in running Gaza. What if Israel needs to go into Gaza again? And because they feel that these Arab countries are not policing terrorism well, and it threatens Israel, is Israel now going to be going to war against those Arab countries? I mean, this could escalate a lot further. Israel, by the way, should never have left an inch of Gaza. It's our land for a start, and secondly, they should be there and utterly destroy Hamas. Say, you've blown your chance at autonomy, therefore we're going to actually embrace the fact that this is our land. And I think should say to the Arabs there, you know what, you've shown us you're not really interested in a state or self-determination. The vast majority of you seem to be supportive of Hamas, want us dead, or have been supportive of that historically. And when we gave you autonomy, look what happened. So Israel should be there, destroy all terror infrastructure, and I think should encourage people Arabs to move to other parts of the Arab world, which will be better for them, by the way, let alone Israel. But of course, that leads us on to the next point. Which is just before J.D. Vance left, there was a vote in the Knesset about whether the West Bank, which is actually, I think, an anti-Israel term, it was created to describe this west of the Jordan River, but this is heartland, Jewish heartland of Israel, Judea and Samaria, including the name Judea, right? And there was a vote on whether it should be annexed. Now, Netanyahu, to try and calm tension, was saying this was a vote intentionally, cynically placed to happen during Vance's visit to try and push the right to create tensions with the American administration. Whatever you think of that, regardless, have a watch of Vance's reaction to this, which, by the way, echoed what Trump himself was saying, which seemed to be a turn from what Trump said previously about Judea and Samaria. So let's first watch Vance.
Thank you, guys.
About the West Bank.
Yeah, go ahead. We'll do. Yeah.
The West Bank vote yesterday that took place while you were in the country.
Oh yeah, that was weird. I was sort of confused by that. Now I actually asked somebody about it, and they told me that it was a symbolic vote, some symbolic vote to recognize or a symbolic vote to annex the West Bank. I mean, what I would say to that is when I asked about it, somebody told me that it was a political stunt, that it had no practical significance. It was purely symbolic. I mean, look, if it was a political stunt, it was a very stupid political stunt, and I personally take some insult to it. The West Bank is not going to be annexed by Israel. The policy of the Trump administration is that the West Bank will not be annexed by Israel. That will continue to be our policy. And if people want to take symbolic votes, they can do that. But we certainly weren't happy about it. Thank you.
Mr. Vice President, you take personal offense at the notion that the land of Judea and Samaria should be under Jewish sovereignty. Well, I'm very sorry that you take personal offense to that, but this is the truth. On every level. Religiously, if you read the Bible, God gave this land to the people of Israel. Historically, if you look at the Palestinian cause, it's entirely cynical. It's not actually based on any genuine national ties to this land as a unique national entity. In fact, the whole Palestinian cause, if you study the history, is so clearly just about trying to destroy Israel. So I'd propose what I said about Gaza could also happen with Judea and Samaria. Secondly, legally, you should know that Israel has an incredibly strong claim to the land. If you want to go back to all kinds of principles of when Britain left the land, there's a legal principle that when a colonizing power leaves land and it hands over territory to the new controlling authority or power, their borders are what was the previous borders. There's another key fact that the League of Nations in the 1920s, they encoded into their international agreement that the borders of Israel, the Jewish homeland, would include Judea and Samaria. From an indigenous perspective, from every perspective. So I'm not quite sure why you're offended. To be honest, I'm a bit offended that you're offended. Well, I'm actually not going to say that I'm offended because I'm not that thin-skinned. But it's quite ridiculous, to be honest. And I think something that Israel needs to find a way to get a grip on is being lectured about who we are and what we can and can't do by other powers. And I want to talk a bit about more on that in a second. But before I do, have a quick watch of this exciting message. A quick update before we continue. I've got some big news for you. We've finally decided to bring JTV in person. I'm planning a speaking tour across America where I'll be talking about everything from the big issues the Jewish people and Israel face today to Judaism's deepest ideas, and of course I'll be taking your questions. If you want me to come to your location, just click the Google form link below in the video description and I'll be in touch. Let's have a conversation. So that is something I'm looking forward to, hopefully in the new year. So if you're interested in hosting an event, if you're part of an organization, if you run an organization or a venue or something like that, please do let me know because we'll reach out to you and see if we can make something happen. Now, going back to JD Vance, to be honest, this is part of a wider problem, I think, that we seem to feel as Jews that we need to somehow cater to half-truths, speak half-truths in order to manage the situation. I say enough of that. Maintaining the status quo, dealing in lies, dealing in a status quo that simply does not protect our security is not right or moral or just. And for those who say if we become super strong and staunch in our positions, well, that could lead to global isolation, I say the current trajectory we're down is leading to global isolation. The more Israel is militarily precise, the more the accusations become about genocide and all of that. It's clearly not working. And more than that, when you speak strongly with conviction about justice, rather than constantly being on the defensive, you say this is why we have a just right to this land to do what we need to do, I think the world actually takes note and listens. Now, by the way, just to remind you about that earlier point I made, that Trump seemed to be giving different signals about Israel's size and certainly Judea and Samaria. Have a watch of this clip from earlier. I think this was a few months ago.
Yes, you've mentioned in the past you're concerned about Israel being too small geographically.
February 2025.
Would you support annexation of parts of the West Bank by Israel?
Well, I'm not going to talk about that. It certainly is a small... it's a small country in terms of land. See this pen, this wonderful pen? My desk is the Middle East, and this pen, the top of the pen, that's Israel. That's not good, right? You know, that's a pretty big difference. I use that as an analogy. It's pretty accurate, actually. It's a pretty small piece of land, and it's amazing that they've been able to do what they've been able to do. When you think about it, there's a lot of good, smart brain power, but it is a very small piece of land, no question about it.
So it's very different signaling there. He's not necessarily calling for annexation of Judea and Samaria, but I'm just noting that. And by the way, his point here is specifically why it is absurd that Israel is seen as the Goliath and the Palestinians as the David. Because if you just zoom out a little bit, you'll see that Israel is surrounded by enemies that will its destruction, as has the Jew been throughout all of history. And the Palestinian thing, which is a lie, is simply a cynical ploy to make it seem like the anti-Israel side is really the David. But they're just at the forefront, the pawn being utilized by the anti-Israel Islamic leftist coalition in order to put pressure on Israel. You know, no one was talking about the Palestinians before the 1960s when they came up with the term. And yet the Arabs were waging war against the Jews, against Israel before then, in 48 and in 67. So this is not about the Palestinians. This is about anti-Semitism mutating, realizing, hold on a sec, if we want to keep up with a world that now says you have to look after the vulnerable and the underdog after the Holocaust, well, the way we're going to make this work is make it seem like the Jews are the new Nazis, the new oppressors. It's sick. It's really sick. And we need to be able to call it out. But the reason I show you this is because simply just wanted to say I have my concerns about JD Vance, and he may be offended, but that's not going to stop me and others from speaking the truth plainly. And to be honest, I would like to hope that with a bit of reasonable discussion and Israel speaking plainly and firmly and staunchly rather than backing down every time they hear these kind of lines from America, I think that actually we could turn a lot of people and make them understand the truth. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Before you go, you have to check out the trailer for our new documentary on Moshiach, the Jewish belief about the Messiah, what he will do, how the world will look after his coming, and why his arrival is close. And if you want to watch the full thing, just click the link below in the video description. For thousands of years, the Jewish people have carried a promise that history is not a random cycle, that suffering and darkness and exile are not the end of the story, that one day the world will be redeemed and the Messiah, the Moshiach in Hebrew, will come. But what does that actually mean? Who is Moshiach? When will he come? How will we know he's real? Why would God design a world that waits so long for redemption in the first place? And what will life feel like after he comes? With AI and machines beginning to replace work, maybe we're already catching a glimpse. But then what will we do with our days? The prophets spoke of that world long ago. In this groundbreaking JTV Plus documentary, we uncover the truth about the Jewish vision of the Messiah, who he is, why it matters, and why his coming could be closer than you think. Join us as we reveal the truth about history's most anticipated figure. To watch this JTV Plus documentary and access much more premium content, click on the link in the video description.